Welcome back, everyone, to Echoes of Ihsan. For this deep dive, we're going to be looking at some excerpts from Sahih Bukhari that you sent to us,
Yes.
and specifically from Book 23, which deals with funerals, or al-janais
Yeah.
in Arabic. And I know funerals might not be the most, upbeat topic,
Right.
but these hadiths are really fascinating, and they offer a lot of insight into Muslim beliefs and practices surrounding death. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, it's a very important topic, and it can be a source of anxiety for people.
Sure.
But I think exploring the traditions around death can bring a lot of clarity and comfort.
Definitely. So to kick things off, you guys sent in Hadiths 329 and 330. And wow, talk about jumping right in.
Right into the deep end.
These lay out some pretty stark consequences based on how you lived your life.
Yeah, they really highlight that core Islamic belief, the idea of tawhid, the oneness of God, Allah. Hadith 329 says that even if someone lived a life full of serious sins, as long as they died believing only in Allah, they would still enter paradise.
So even if someone committed like theft or adultery,
Yeah.
because those are considered pretty major sins in Islam, right?
Yeah, they are major sins, but this hadith is really emphasizing that associating partners with Allah, what's known as shirk, is considered the ultimate sin.
Okay.
That outweighs everything else.
So it's like the belief in the absolute oneness of God is the most important thing.
That's a great way to put it. It's recognizing that nothing else should be worshipped alongside Allah.
Right.
Only He is worthy of worship. That's a really fundamental principle in Islam.
And then Hadith 330 basically flips it and says anyone who dies worshiping anything besides Allah alongside Allah will be destined for hellfire.
Right. It emphasizes the gravity of shirk. It's
Okay.
making that clear distinction between those who uphold tawhid and those who don't.
Got it.
And their actions are ultimately judged in light of their belief in God.
So these first two hadiths are like a crash course in Islamic Theology 101, setting the stage for everything else that we're going to talk about.
Absolutely. It establishes that foundational belief in the oneness of God and the consequences of associating partners with Him. And this really frames the rest of the discussion about how Muslims should live their lives and how they approach death.
All right, well, you certainly didn't ease us in with those first two, but I think we're ready to move on to the next set, hadiths 331 and 332. What can you tell us about those?
Well, these ones shift the focus from belief to action. They lay out 7 things that Muslims are commanded to do and 7 things that are forbidden.
Okay, so kind of like a guidebook to living a good Islamic life.
Right.
What's on the top of that to-do list?
The very first thing it mentions is following funeral processions.
Interesting. So it seems like such a simple act, but it's given a lot of importance here.
Yeah, it speaks to the emphasis on community and supporting one another, especially during difficult times. Being present at funerals is a way of showing solidarity with the grieving family and honoring the deceased. And it's a reminder of our shared humanity and the fleeting nature of this life.
And it ties into that idea of preparing for death, right? Seeing a funeral procession is a reminder of your own mortality.
Absolutely. It encourages reflection
Yeah.
on one's own life and actions. And it prompts us to consider how we want to be remembered and what legacy we'll leave behind.
What else is on that list of 7 commanded actions?
So in addition to following funeral processions, there's visiting the sick, fulfilling oaths, returning greetings, supporting the oppressed, accepting invitations, and guiding someone who asks you for directions.
So it's really like a roadmap for living a life of kindness, compassion, and integrity.
Yeah, it reflects the emphasis in Islam on living a life that benefits both yourself and those around you.
Right.
It's about cultivating a sense of social responsibility and striving for excellence in our interactions with others.
And I'm guessing the list of forbidden actions has a similar focus on ethics and morality.
It does. The first thing on that list is being extravagant with silver utensils.
Okay.
And then it talks about gold rings and silk clothing for men. It also condemns things like wailing, tearing your clothes in grief, or cursing others.
So there's an emphasis on humility and avoiding ostentatious displays of wealth.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
It's recognizing that material possessions are fleeting. True wealth lies in piety and good deeds.
Yeah.
So these prohibitions encourage us to detach from worldly attachments and focus on what really matters.
It's a fascinating contrast, isn't it? On one hand, you're called to actively support your community.
Right?
And on the other hand, you're reminded to keep your ego in check and avoid excessive materialism.
Yeah, it's all about finding that balance between fulfilling your obligations to others and maintaining a humble, God-conscious heart.
Right.
It's a constant reminder that our actions and our intentions are always being evaluated,
Yeah.
and that we should strive to live in a way that pleases God.
I feel like we could unpack those two hadiths for hours, but you know how much I love a good story.
Me too.
So let's move on to Hadith 333. What can you tell us about that one?
This one takes us to a really pivotal moment in Islamic history, the death of Prophet Muhammad.
Oh, wow.
It captures that raw emotion, the initial reaction of his companions when he passed away.
I can only imagine the grief and confusion. They must have felt losing their leader, their teacher, their prophet.
It was a profound loss, but amidst that grief, Abu Bakr, who would later become the first caliph, stepped forward and he said, "Muhammad is dead, but whoever worshipped Allah, Allah is alive and will never die."
Such a powerful statement. I bet that really grounded the community in their faith during that difficult time.
Absolutely. It was that crucial reminder that the prophet, peace be upon him, was a messenger of God,
Right.
but ultimately their devotion was to the eternal, to the ever-living God.
So even in the face of such a profound loss, their faith in the oneness of God remained unshaken.
Yeah, it was a testament to the strength of their belief. And this hadith also serves as a really important message for all Muslims, reaffirming that the Prophet, while he is beloved and revered, was a human being, and our ultimate focus should always be on Allah.
I bet this ties in with the next set of hadiths that you sent over, numbers 369 through 372, which deal with excessive mourning, right?
Yeah, you're right. These hadiths address the emotional response to death, and specifically the dangers of excessive grief and mourning.
Okay.
So while Islam acknowledges the natural feelings of sorrow, it discourages those excessive displays of grief that kind of border on despair or actions that go against Islamic teaching.
Like wailing or tearing clothes, those kind of dramatic mourning rituals.
Exactly. The Prophet explicitly condemned these actions,
Okay.
and he emphasized the importance of patience and acceptance in the face of death, and he taught that true comfort comes from faith
Okay.
and from understanding that death is not the end, but a transition to another life.
So a very balanced approach to grief.
Yeah.
Acknowledging the pain, but encouraging resilience and faith.
Exactly. It's about channeling grief in a way that's aligned with Islamic teachings.
Right.
Finding solace in prayer, remembering the good deeds of the deceased, and continuing their legacy through acts of kindness and charity.
And speaking of the Prophet, you also sent over a really interesting hadith number 336 that offers a comforting image for those who are grieving. What's that one about?
It says that after a person dies, angels shade their soul until the body is moved, which is a beautiful way of emphasizing God's mercy and providing solace to those who have lost loved ones. It's reassuring to know that even in death, God's care continues.
That's a beautiful image. It's like saying even in that transition between life and death, you're not alone.
Right.
There's this divine presence.
Yeah, it speaks to that profound belief in the continuation of life after death. It suggests that death is not this abrupt ending, but a passage into another realm, a journey that begins the moment we depart from this world.
Yeah, the very different perspective than what you often hear in like secular society, where death is often portrayed as just this ultimate end.
Yeah.
You know, just lights out.
It's this annihilation, but this hadith offers a very different perspective, a glimpse into that Islamic understanding of death as a transition, not an annihilation. And this concept really shapes how Muslims approach death and find comfort in the face of loss.
Okay, so we've covered some pretty heavy theological ground here. We've talked about the oneness of God, the importance of good deeds, how to approach grief, and even got a little glimpse into what happens after death. What else is there?
Well, the next set of hadiths dives into some of the more practical aspects of dealing with death, specifically the rituals and practices surrounding it.
Okay, so I'm ready to learn about the specifics.
Okay.
What do these hadiths say about how Muslims should treat the body after death?
Well, hadiths 344 to 353 provide detailed instructions on how to wash and shroud the body.
So we're getting into the nitty-gritty of Islamic funeral rites here.
Exactly. For example, they talk about the use of water, sigr, which is a type of tree and camphor in washing the body.
Okay.
This emphasizes the importance of purification, even in death.
And are there specific instructions on how to wash the body?
Absolutely. The hadiths emphasize starting with the right side
Okay.
and washing the parts that are washed during ablution, the ritual cleansing before prayer. So it's like carrying over that sense of ritual purity into the process of preparing the body for burial.
Exactly. It shows the reverence and respect that Muslims have for the human body, even after death.
Right. The hadiths go into a lot of detail about how to handle the body gently,
Sure.
how to make sure every part is cleansed, how to maintain modesty throughout the process.
Wow.
There's a lot of attention to detail there.
It's fascinating.
Yeah.
Like every step is imbued with meaning and significance.
Yeah, and you're right. It's not just about following a set of rules.
Right.
It's about performing these rituals with intention and understanding.
Right.
It's about honoring the deceased and preparing them for their journey to the afterlife.
You mentioned shrouding the body. What do the Hadiths say about that?
Hadiths 354 to 363 describe the shroud that was used for the Prophet Muhammad himself.
Okay.
And it was incredibly simple, just 3 pieces of white cotton cloth.
Really? That's it. No elaborate decorations or fancy fabrics.
Yep.
Nope, that's the point. It highlights that Islamic emphasis on humility and equality in death, regardless of your status in life.
Yeah.
Everyone is shrouded in the same simple manner.
Right.
It's a reminder that we all return to God in the same way.
It's a powerful message about the fleeting nature of worldly possessions and status. In death, those distinctions fade away.
Exactly. These hadiths remind us that our true worth is determined by our actions and our relationship with God,
Right.
not by our wealth or social standing.
Okay.
It levels the playing field in a really profound way.
That's a thought-provoking concept to consider, especially in a world that often places so much emphasis on material wealth and social status.
Right. It's a reminder to focus on what truly matters.
Yeah.
Cultivating virtues like humility, compassion, generosity, these are the qualities that will define our legacy,
Absolutely.
not our possessions or titles.
Okay, so we've covered the washing and the shrouding. What other rituals or practices do these hadiths address?
Well, there's a repeated emphasis on the prohibition of wailing and loud lamentations, particularly in hadiths 381 to 393.
So even though grief is a natural response,
Yeah.
Islam encourages a more restrained expression of sorrow.
Yes.
Okay.
There's a focus on channeling that grief towards acceptance and prayer, rather than outward displays of anguish.
Okay.
The Prophet discouraged things like tearing clothes, scratching your face, shaving your head.
And is there a specific reason for this prohibition? Is it seen as disrespectful to the deceased, or is it more about...
It's more about understanding that these excessive displays of grief, particularly those that involve self-harm or imitate pre-Islamic mourning practices,
Right.
are seen as going against the principles of patience and acceptance that Islam emphasizes.
So it's not about suppressing grief, but expressing it in a way that aligns with Islamic teachings.
Right. It's about finding constructive ways to cope with loss that honor the deceased and strengthen your faith. It's about seeking solace in God's mercy and trusting in his divine plan.
Okay, that makes sense. So we've covered the importance of community support, the prohibition of excessive mourning, and the specific rituals for preparing the body. What else do these hadiths highlight?
Well, they emphasize the importance of respect for the dead, regardless of their faith.
Oh, interesting. So this respect extends beyond the Muslim community.
Absolutely. Hadiths 394 to 399 talk about proper etiquette when encountering funeral processions.
Mm.
For example, it's considered respectful to stand when a funeral procession passes by, even if the deceased wasn't a Muslim.
Wow. That's a really powerful statement about recognizing the inherent dignity of all human beings, regardless of their beliefs.
It speaks to those universal values of empathy and compassion.
Yeah.
There's a beautiful hadith where someone informs the Prophet that a funeral procession passing by is that of a Jewish person. And the Prophet responds, "Is it not a living being?"
Wow. That really underscores the Islamic emphasis on the sanctity of life and treating everyone with respect, regardless of their faith.
Right. It reminds us that our shared humanity transcends those religious boundaries. We are all part of God's creation, and we should treat each other with dignity and compassion.
Okay, so we've covered a lot of ground here. We've talked about the Islamic approach to grief, the specific rituals involved in preparing the body for burial, and even the importance of showing respect for the dead, regardless of their faith. What else do these hadiths have in store for us?
Well, the next set of hadiths takes us into a really fascinating realm, the journey of the soul after death.
Okay, now we're getting into the really mysterious stuff. I'm intrigued. What do these hadiths say about what happens to the soul after it leaves the body?
Well, hadiths 400 and 402 offer some vivid imagery. They describe the soul after leaving the body being carried by angels. And get this, the soul actually speaks.
Whoa.
It either urges the angels to hurry towards its final resting place if it was a righteous soul,
Okay.
or it cries out in misery if it was not.
That sends chills down my spine. It makes the whole concept of the soul's journey so much more real.
Right. It paints this really powerful picture. And there's another detail that's really interesting. This voice of the soul, the Hadiths say, can be heard by everything except humans.
Really?
If we could hear it, we would faint from the intensity.
So it's like there's this whole other dimension of existence happening around us that we're just not equipped to perceive with our human senses.
Exactly.
Okay.
It makes you wonder what else we might be missing.
Right.
These hadiths offer just a glimpse into a reality that's beyond our normal understanding. It's a reminder that there's so much more to this universe than what we can see and touch.
Okay, so the soul is on this journey being carried by angels. What happens next?
Well, according to Hadiths 422 and 456, the soul then faces questioning by angels in the grave. This is like the first stage of judgment. The angels Munkar and Nakir question the deceased about their beliefs and actions during their life.
So it's like a spiritual pop quiz right after you die.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's a reminder that our time on earth is a test, and we're going to be held accountable for our choices. The questioning in the grave is the initial stage of that accountability.
Got it.
It's where the soul's eternal fate starts to take shape.
So how does that questioning play out differently for believers versus non-believers?
Well, imagine this. The believer, having lived a life grounded in faith and good deeds, is asked about their Lord, their prophet, and their religion. And they confidently affirm their belief in Allah and his messenger.
Okay.
That brings peace and tranquility to their soul,
Yeah.
even within the grave.
Right.
It's like a foretaste of the eternal bliss of paradise.
It's a really comforting thought for those who are left behind, knowing that their loved one is at peace.
It is, but on the flip side, the hadiths describe a much different experience for those who rejected faith during their life. They struggle to answer the angels' questions.
Sure.
Their hearts are filled with doubt and regret and betray them. They can't affirm the truth.
Right.
And this results in punishment within the grave, a preview of the eternal torment that awaits them in hellfire.
Okay, wow. That's a pretty stark contrast, and it
Right.
really drives home the point that our actions in this life have eternal consequences.
Absolutely. It emphasizes the importance of aligning our lives with God's will. It's not just about outward rituals, but about cultivating that inner belief
Yeah.
and letting it guide our actions.
And what about people who lived hypocritical lives, outwardly claiming faith but not truly believing? What happens to them during this questioning?
Well, their fate is described as particularly grim. They might try to dodge the angels' questions, pretending they don't know the answers or parroting what they've heard others say,
Right.
but ultimately their hypocrisy is laid bare.
It's like their own heart testifies against them.
Exactly. The hadiths say that their punishment is severe and their cries of anguish can be heard by everything except humans and jinn. So it's a chilling reminder that true faith isn't just about putting on a show. It's about that deep inner conviction that guides your thoughts, your words, your actions.
It's a call to authenticity, living a life that reflects your true beliefs and your commitment to God.
Right. It's about that inner alignment
That-
between your heart and your deeds, which is ultimately what pleases God.
Thinking back to that hadith about the prophet's death,
Yeah.
I'm struck by how his passing provides a really powerful lesson for all Muslims.
Yeah.
Um,
His death, just like his life,
yeah.
was a testament to his humanity and his unwavering faith.
Right.
But even in that moment of profound grief, the companions were reminded that Muhammad is dead, but whoever worshipped Allah, Allah is alive and will never die.
Right. It was a reminder that their ultimate allegiance was to God, not to any human being, no matter how beloved or revered.
Precisely. And that message resonates even today, reminding us that our focus should always be on God.
Right.
And this idea connects beautifully to the hadiths about excessive mourning.
Right.
They provide this guidance on how to navigate grief in a way that honors both your loved ones and your faith.
They emphasize patience and acceptance, discouraging actions that are seen as excessive or harmful. It's about channeling your grief into prayer and good deeds, remembering the deceased with love and respect.
Exactly. It's about understanding that death is a natural part of life,
Yeah.
a transition to another realm.
Yeah.
It's not about denying the pain of loss, but it's about finding solace and strength in your faith.
Okay, so we've explored this profound concept of the soul's journey after death, the questioning in the grave, the consequences for believers and non-believers. But you also send some hadiths that delve into the more practical rituals surrounding death. What can you tell us about those?
Well, Hadiths 344 to 353, for example, give very specific instructions on how to wash and shroud the body after death.
Okay.
They emphasize the importance of purification and respect, even in death.
So even in those final moments, there's this deep sense of care and reverence for the human body.
Absolutely.
Okay.
The ritual washing known as ghusl involves washing the body with water, sidr, and camphor.
Right.
It's a symbolic act of purification, preparing the deceased for their journey to the afterlife.
And the hadiths go into detail about the order of the washing,
Yeah.
starting with the right side
Yeah.
and washing the parts that are also cleansed during ablution, the ritual washing before prayer.
Right. It's like an echo of that ritual purity carried over into the process of preparing the body for burial.
Yeah.
It's a powerful reminder that even in death, we're not just discarding a physical shell.
Right.
We're treating the body with respect and honoring the person who inhabited it.
And then there's the shrouding. You mentioned earlier that the prophet was shrouded in very simple white cloth. Is that the standard practice?
Yes. The Hadiths emphasize the simplicity of the shroud. It's usually made of white cotton cloth.
Okay.
It's meant to be unadorned and modest.
That simplicity speaks volumes, doesn't it? It's like stripping away all those worldly distinctions of wealth and status. In death, everyone is equal.
It's a powerful symbol of our shared humanity.
Yeah.
It reminds us that what truly matters is our faith, our actions, and our relationship with God.
It's a humbling thought, especially in a world that often places so much emphasis on material possessions and outward appearances.
Right. It's a reminder to focus on what's truly important.
Yeah.
Cultivating a life of meaning and purpose, a life that reflects our values and our commitment to something greater than ourselves.
You know, it's interesting how all these practical rituals tie back into those deeper theological concepts we were talking about earlier. It's all connected.
It is. The rituals are not just empty actions.
Right.
They're expressions of our beliefs, our values, our understanding of life and death.
Right.
They connect us to our faith and to the wider Muslim community.
It's like every action, every detail is imbued with meaning and purpose.
That's the beauty of it. It's about approaching these rituals with intention,
Yeah.
with understanding, and with a heart that's connected to God.
Okay, so we've covered the washing, the shrouding, and the general emphasis on respect for the dead. But you also mentioned some hadiths that talk specifically about the punishment of the grave, something that the Prophet himself sought refuge from. What exactly is this punishment, and why is it something to be feared?
This is a concept that often causes anxiety for people,
Sure.
but it's important to understand it within the context of Islamic beliefs about accountability and divine justice.
So it's not about God being vengeful or inflicting pain arbitrarily.
Not at all. The punishment of the grave, as described in Hadiths 458 and 459, is a spiritual torment that's experienced by those who die in a state of disbelief or hypocrisy.
Okay.
It's a preview of the eternal torment that awaits them in hellfire.
So it's a consequence of their choices in this life.
Exactly.
Okay.
It's a reminder that our actions have lasting repercussions. They
Right.
don't just disappear when we die. They shape our eternal fate.
Yeah.
And the Prophet's frequent supplications for protection from this punishment highlight how seriously we should take this matter.
It's a wake-up call to examine your own heart, assess your actions, and make sure you're living in a way that pleases God.
Right. It's a reminder that we have this precious opportunity to choose the path that leads to God's mercy and eternal bliss.
Right.
It's about prioritizing our spiritual growth and making amends for our shortcomings before it's too late.
Okay, so we've talked about the consequences of our actions, both in this life and in the next. But what about those final moments before burial? Is there a specific prayer that's offered for the deceased?
Yes, the funeral prayer, known as Salat al-Janazah, is a collective act of worship performed by Muslims for the deceased. It's a way of seeking God's mercy and forgiveness on their behalf and expressing our final respects.
It's a beautiful expression of community, isn't it?
It is.
Coming together to support each other and to honor the deceased.
It is a testament to the bonds of compassion and solidarity within the Muslim community.
Right.
And what's remarkable is that the Prophet offered this prayer not just for Muslims, but also for non-Muslims.
Really? That's incredible.
Yeah.
It speaks volumes about the inclusiveness of Islamic teachings.
Absolutely. His willingness to offer this prayer for those outside of his own community shows the breadth of his compassion and the universality of certain moral principles.
It's a reminder that our shared humanity transcends religious boundaries. We're all connected.
Exactly. And the funeral prayer itself is a beautiful embodiment of that connection. It brings people together from all walks of life in a shared act of worship and compassion.
And what are the specifics of this prayer? What does it involve?
Well, Hadiths 403 to 421 offer some insights into the funeral prayer. It's a relatively simple ritual. It involves 4 takbirs, which are statements of Allahu Akbar, God is great,
Oh,
and the recitation of Surah Al-Fatiha, the opening chapter of the Quran.
right.
There are also specific supplications for the deceased,
Okay.
asking for God's forgiveness and mercy.
It sounds like a beautiful and powerful way to say goodbye. And it reminds me of that hadith you mentioned earlier about the prophet performing the funeral prayer for a black man who used to clean the mosque.
That's a great example.
Yeah.
It highlights how Islam values every individual, regardless of their social standing or background. We are all equal in the eyes of God.
It's a message that resonates deeply in today's world, where we often see so much division and inequality.
Yeah, it's a call for compassion, for inclusivity, for recognizing the inherent dignity of every human being.
And it's a reminder that even in death, we are all connected. We are all part of one human family journeying back to our Creator.
And that journey is made more meaningful when we live our lives with purpose, with kindness, and with a deep connection to our faith.
Wow, we've covered a lot of ground in this deep dive. From the grand concepts of the afterlife to the specifics of funeral ritual, we've explored a wide range of beliefs and practices. What stands out to you as the most important message that emerges from these hadiths?
Well, I think the most powerful message is the emphasis on mercy, justice, and respect for life. These values are woven into every aspect of how Muslims approach death,
Yeah.
from the way we treat the deceased to how we grieve and how we strive to live our lives.
It's like even in the face of death, our humanity shines through.
Right.
It's expressed in those acts of compassion and kindness and that deep reverence for the human soul.
And it's a message that goes beyond just one religion or culture. It's a universal truth that speaks to the inherent dignity of every human being.
I think that's what makes this deep dive so fascinating. We're not just talking about rituals or rules here.
Right.
We're exploring a whole way of thinking about life and death,
Yeah.
a framework for navigating these really profound experiences with faith and dignity.
Exactly. It's about understanding that death isn't the end. It's a transition, a continuation. And these hadiths offer a glimpse into that next realm.
Right.
The questioning in the grave,
Right.
the rewards and punishments,
Yeah.
the eternal bliss of paradise or the torment of hellfire.
It's definitely made me think about my own actions and choices, knowing that they have consequences, not just in this life, but in the hereafter too.
Yeah.
It's pretty powerful.
It's a reminder that this life is precious.
Yeah.
A test, a journey towards our true home with God. And these hadiths serve as a guide, helping us navigate that journey and make choices that lead us closer to God's mercy.
Okay. So we've covered a lot of ground here, from the oneness of God and the importance of good deeds to the specifics of Islamic funeral rites. For our listeners who are just starting to explore these hadiths, what would you say is the most important thing to keep in mind?
I'd say focus on that core message of mercy, justice, and respect for life that we keep coming back to. Let that guide your understanding of these teachings and how you apply them to your own life.
It's about remembering that we're all connected.
Yeah.
We all share this human experience, and ultimately we all return to God.
It's about living a life that reflects those values, a life that leaves a positive impact on the world and earns God's favor.
This has been an incredibly insightful deep dive. Thank you so much for guiding us through these complex and often misunderstood topics.
It's been my pleasure. And for those of you listening who are interested in learning more, I encourage you to explore Sahih Bukhari further. There's so much wisdom to be found within its pages.
And maybe as you're reading, consider this. What do you want people to say about you at your own funeral? What kind of life do you need to live to make those words a reality?
That's a powerful question to reflect on.
Yeah.
It reminds us that we're writing our own stories every single day.
And until next time, may peace and blessings be upon you.
Well, I think the most powerful message that comes through in all of these hadiths is this emphasis on mercy, justice, and respect for life. These values are kind of woven into every aspect of how Muslims approach death, from the way we treat the deceased to how we grieve and how we strive to live our lives.
It's like even in the face of death, our humanity shines through. You know, it's expressed in those acts of compassion and kindness,
Yeah.
and that deep reverence for the human soul.
Absolutely. And it's a message that goes beyond just one religion or culture.
Right.
It's a universal truth that speaks to the inherent dignity of every human being.
That's what makes this deep dive so fascinating.
Yeah.
We're not just talking about rituals or rules here.
Right.
We're exploring a whole way of thinking about life and death, a framework for navigating these really profound experiences
Yeah,
with faith and dignity.
exactly. It's about understanding that death isn't the end.
Right.
It's a transition, a continuation. And these hadiths offer a glimpse into that next realm, the questioning in the grave, the rewards and punishments, the eternal bliss of paradise, or the torment of hellfire.
Yeah, it's definitely made me think about my own actions and choices, knowing that they have consequences not just in this life,
Right.
but in the hereafter too. It's pretty powerful stuff.
It's a reminder that this life is precious, a test, a journey towards our true home with God. And these hadiths serve as a guide helping us navigate that journey and make choices that lead us closer to God's mercy.
So we've covered a lot of ground here, from the oneness of God, the importance of good deeds, to the specifics of Islamic funeral rites. For our listeners who are just starting to explore these hadiths, what would you say is the most important thing to keep in mind?
I'd say focus on that core message of mercy, justice, and respect for life that we keep coming back to. Let that be your guide.
Yeah.
Let that guide your understanding of these teachings and how you apply them to your own life.
Yeah. It's about remembering that we're all connected. We all share this human experience, and ultimately we all return to God.
It's about living a life that reflects those values, a life that leaves a positive impact on the world and earns God's favor.
This has been an incredibly insightful deep dive. Thank you so much for guiding us through these complex and often misunderstood topics.
It's been my pleasure. And for those of you listening who are interested in learning more, I encourage you to explore Sahih Bukhari further. There's so much wisdom to be found within its pages.
And maybe as you're reading, consider this. What do you want people to say about you at your own funeral? What kind of life do you need to live to make those words a reality?
That's a powerful question to reflect on. It reminds us that we're writing our own stories every single day.
And until next time, may peace and blessings be upon you.